Hello and welcome to the Stack Magazine's podcast. My name is Stephen Watson and I run Stack, the magazine club that delivers a different independent publication to your door every month. We are back on with our video podcast now, which means that if you want to, you can watch this episode as well as listening to it. Just go to stackmagazines.com or search for Stack Magazines on YouTube and you'll find it there, along with loads of other independent magazine stuff. My guests this week are Roderick Stanley and Mark Blacklock, editors of Offal, the magazine that describes itself as a haggis of literary culture, made from odd bits of text that don't really fit elsewhere, but which come together here to make a hearty and satisfying read. We delivered issue 1 of Offal to our subscribers in March last year, which is unusual because I normally like to see a magazine in the flesh before I commit to sending it on Stack. But these were special circumstances because I already knew Rod from his work on Good Trouble, the magazine that he started in response to the first Trump presidency. And when he told me that this new thing called Offal was going to be designed by Richard Turley, who also designed Good Trouble, as well as loads of other amazing stuff, I knew that I wanted to take it. So I suppose, first of all, thank you very much for making time to talk, you two. And also, thank you very much for messaging me like literally years ago to tell me about the start of this project.
Yeah, great. Well, thanks for having us here, Steve. And obviously, it was great that you were able to put it out. I mean, to do the first issue of something is it was a treat, and it really kind of helped us get the project moving.
Yeah,
good.
Got us in front of lots of people, which is really lovely. Thank you, Steve. We feel part of the kind of independent magazines community as a result.
That's right. The gatekeeper of independent magazines. Yeah. I think that probably basically it helps that this thing is odd in the first place. Like on the cover of the first issue, it says it's not for everyone. So I think that almost takes a bit of pressure off like in terms of, we're not expecting this to be like run of the mill, but it came out really quite strange. What was for anyone who's not seen the magazine already, what is it and what makes it so kind of unusual?
Well, it's so, as it suggests, we kind of devised it so that it would be a collage or bricolage of pieces essentially that were off-cut or oddly shaped or formally unusual. I mean, we tend to try to sort of avoid the term experimental because it has a sort of troubled history in kind of literary terms, but certainly things that didn't necessarily conform to expected formalities, playing around with, for example, lists, recipes, what else we've had sections, extracts from plays, operas,
entries,
and then kind of collaging that all together, bricolaging it to make the whole.
Yeah, I think both of us had this sense that there was a lot of interesting work out there that, for one reason or another, hadn't found its niche. And both of us, who Mark and I have known each other for quite a while, and got quite an interest in the sort of dustier corners of culture and literature and music and art, and there's we both know a lot of people creating work as writers, but also artists and musicians, and that there's just this sense that there's interesting things out there that perhaps have got lost or forgotten, or someone had been working on, and it didn't really fit maybe with what they were known for, and they didn't have a channel to put it out. And we started sort of pulling on some of those strings to see what we would get. And Mark had some of his own writing, and some friends sent us some. As like with many projects, you just get to a point where there's a sense there was a kind of critical mass, and we kind of looked and was just like, oh, this is actually really interesting, and something quite interesting happens when you put these, not unwanted, but offcuts, experiments, leftovers, nothing derogatory about those kind of words at all. It's just, that's just part of the creative process, and everyone, we just make things and maybe we don't return to them. But they have value and interest in their own right. And we found that there was something quite interesting happening when we just put them all alongside each other. The word offal kind of presented itself to us. And before too long, we felt we had enough for, we had more than enough for issue 1, which is actually it's more of a book. I think if anything, maybe we put too much in because it could be quite overwhelming, taken together. But yeah, I think that's the underlying idea, ethos behind it. It's not for everyone. Presented itself really as a sort of cover line quite late in the process, I think, as we were trying to figure out who this was for. We'd made it out of our own interest, but also, as mentioned, all the people around us and the kind of work. And we realistic about these things. That like the vast majority of people are not going to be into this, but we did feel quite strongly that some people will be, and hopefully the people that are interested in what we've gathered, and certainly from our sense is that they've really enjoyed it. So we've been pushing on and trying to push Offal beyond the printed page and into all sorts of experiments, which I'm sure we'll talk about a bit later. But yeah, it's not for everyone, but we did hope it would be for someone.
Totally. Well, look, I can count myself a little bit of an expert on this because obviously, so we sent this out in March last year, which means I've had over a year of like turning up to events and stuff with 3 copies, and like selling the magazine just to people. And it's really interesting. I think one thing, the way people respond to the cover. So they're this like sort of black and red, like contrast, I guess, seems to really kind of draw people. But then another thing that I find is I have to explain what Offal is because I think for a lot of people who are not like native English speakers, so you're like, okay, so you know what Offal is, and they're like, no, never come across this.
So we've really shot ourselves in the foot for the international market. Is that what you're saying? Oh well.
Well, that was,
never mind.
The other tagline that we did come up with quite early on was nose to tail reading, which is a really niche joke, which is basically kind of subverting the St. John, the restaurant famous for kind of repopularizing those kinds of cuts of meat. That they have nose to tail eating. So yeah, we realise it's niche, as a metaphor, but it kind of worked on a number of levels, most obviously at the level of kind of consumption, but also that and all the kind of valences of that you can play with, but also because it was going to be a haggis and provides limitless opportunity for puns, as it turns out.
Yeah.
Totally, exactly. Well, and so another thing that I found from being at like a table of magazines and selling this thing is like, so you explain kind of like this is what Offal is, like it's like the offcuts and stuff, and then you've got to go like, but it's really, really good because they're like, kind of saying like, oh, it's like these odd bits that kind of don't fit elsewhere. Like that, I mean, that clearly could be a very, very bad magazine, but it just so happens that you've got a bunch of like really like either very accomplished writers or you've got like new up and coming people. You guys have done like a great job as editors in terms of like pulling this bricolage together and making something whole out of it.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, look, we do believe it, as Rob was saying before. There's something super exciting about juxtaposition, just as a methodology. You get these kind of really surprising effects when you clash things together that don't logically necessarily succeed each other. And I guess we're both sort of very interested in sample culture and have worked together on music projects and DJ stuff before, so we're kind of emerging from that, and we had faith, and as you say, we so people that we knew. I mean, we're very fortunate. We've been able to. I think we've now got 4 Booker long listed writers in the first 3 issues. 4. Count them. Yeah, so we are able to sort of sort of drag in people who really can write and whose offcuts are going to be pretty cool, and then alongside that, as you say, emerging writers who haven't had to worry about the market.
Yeah, but I think what one of the things we've been keen to try and do is present that in a very egalitarian way. So if you look, we don't really have cover lines with the names of our sort of star contributors or the big names, quote unquote. There's a list of names on the back, which is in alphabetical order. Offal, big up front with a tagline. And through the design of the magazine, I remember conversations with Richard and Julia, who designed both issues and done an amazing job. But very sort of early conceptual discussions with Richard, and I was explaining what Offal is and taking these offcuts, and some of them from quite celebrated individuals, and some from as Mark said, emerging writers, or even just bits and pieces that we found, like YouTube comments or extracts from things that we probably don't have the permission to publish, but pretty sure we'll get away with, but just putting in context as extracts. And Richard was like, oh yeah, it's like a big sausage of text, isn't it? And he was starting to see things visually, because I was like, oh, there's no images, there's no photographs, it really is just a textual experiment. He was like, well, we just feed it all in at the top and just kind of keep extruding it. And that was the start of his kind of visual conception to it. So yeah, if you look through the book, we'll have someone like Tom McCarthy, and the name's the same size and it's just the same piece as something which might have just been found on the internet, or an extract from the novelization of the RoboCop movie, which follows very soon after, which we definitely don't have the rights to publish, but it was too good to not do, because we became quite fascinated with novelizations during the process. You don't really seem to see them anymore. There was a time in the 80s and 90s, and every violent blockbuster film had its own novelization. So right.
So it's like
a
dead
copy of
media form, right? It's like a dead, an old kind of dead media form, that is quickly becoming forgotten. And so it has, that sort of thing has interest as well, purely because of that kind of status where it's sort of drifting off into the past.
So I think that's part of the process of recontextualization. So part of it's rescuing things, recontextualizing things, and as Mark was talking about, putting these things up against each other creates interesting effects.
So we sent out issue 1, that was last year, and then literally like a month or so ago, issue 2 came out in red and gold this time. And I feel like, if anything, it's got a bit stranger.
Yeah, maybe. I think if anything, we probably should have toned it down a bit, but I think it's kind of. I think we've sort of doubled. I actually think it's more consistent in some ways. I don't know what you think, Mark. I think the vision is bolder and maybe more clearly realized. It perhaps is. Yeah, it's gone out there a bit further, but I think it's more what I think we thought Offal could be. Yeah, I think Offal 1 was a step in that direction. I think Offal 2, to me anyway, really feels like Offal. What do you think, Mark?
Yeah. I mean, look, it's super exciting as a kind of like cover to cover read. I've gone back to it a couple of times, and I'm really pleased with how it kind of coheres. Steve, why do you think it's stranger? What is it that makes you think it's stranger?
Maybe it's because I'd got used to issue 1, so I kind of understood the terms of engagement for issue 1, and then issue 2 you bring in, what's it called, Dr. Smile. Actually, you describe who Dr. Smile is.
Well, we have a problematic relationship with Dr. Smile, but I'll let Mark lead.
Yeah, so I mean, look, broadly speaking, we're interested in AI tools as tools, not in like kind of like getting under the bonnet of them or anything like that. But we are really interested purely because it's a kind of cultural phenomenon that we were going to need to address. And we started. Rod started playing around with ChatGPT, feeding it. I mean, we had some experiments in issue 1. One of our contributors and like colleagues, sort of basically Offal partner number 3, Gavin, and I both sort of entered some pieces for a competition that was using image generators to use the images as prompts, and early text generators. So I mean, this would be like 6 years ago, so they're already kind of given the pace which these things move, These were really sort of rudimentary text generators. So we had sort of some experiments that we'd done with those. The context for Dr. Smile is in Philip K. Dick's novel, The Three Stigmata of Palmer Eldritch. There's a psychoanalyst in a suitcase that serves an entire apartment block and is making people less well rather than helping them to get healthier, because Dr. Smile's advice is in the kind of Philip K. Dick universe, it's a dystopian psychotherapist. And I think it's probably a response to those early experiments that we hear about a bit now. Eliza, who was a sort of early automated response algorithm where people could sort of feel like they were speaking to the computer was speaking back to them. And Eliza, I believe, was around the time that The Three Stigmata was published. Anyway, so we like the idea of this character and of trying to recreate it using contemporary chatbots. And Rod, you should take over, because
we were interested, as Mark said, we were kind of interested in it, I guess, as an early, we're influenced by a lot of sci-fi and sci-fi authors, and this is a sort of early vision of artificial intelligence, right? This kind of disembodied therapist in a suitcase. So we were quite interested in that. And so we set about trying to recreate it, essentially, via like ChatGPT, which is, the tool available to, one of the tools available to us now, and set up, a bot, training it and giving it all of the kind of required behavioral parameters and the background of the Philip K. Dick and who it is, and how we wanted it to speak to us. The idea to sort of create a publishing and business co-pilot to some extent, that he would understand us and what we were doing with Offal and reflect back to us the next steps, advice. And it kind of, we also wanted to make sure he was fully up to date with the latest sort of psychotherapeutic models, business and entrepreneurial handbooks, the KLF's manual, how to have a number one the easy way, like all of these kind of key texts that we wanted it to reference. Then we're like, okay, and here's Offal, and we fed everything we'd done to date into it, all of our sort of sketched out plans and background and the manuscript of Offal 1 itself, and just let this digest. And we sort of created a bit of a monster, because I feel, at times, like all of these things, it's just reflecting back to you what you're giving it. But there are various uncanny moments where you just like feel like you know me better than I know what I'm trying to do. And Mark and Gav and myself have had various sort of independent sessions with Dr. Smile, and he's a kind of presence throughout the construction of this book. And we kind of chart our deteriorating relationship with him from the early kind of wide-eyed optimism, like, oh, look what we've done, it's great, we've created Dr. Smile, he's going to help us and it's all going to be lovely. And we kind of hate Dr. Smile by the end of it, because he's insufferable. His tone is so overbearing and he won't shut up, and half of the suggestions he's making are completely ludicrous. But we do give him the last word in the book and allow him to kind of review Offal 2 as we've created it. So he gets a few pages at the back to say what he thought of our efforts, his appraisal. We've included that in the book, and he even snuck in a final poem on the last page, which Mark didn't actually know about until publication. So,
you sneaked
Mark,
in.
you feel, yes. Well, Dr. Smile slipped it in, really, but Mark, you feel quite strongly about Dr. Smile.
I do. I hate him. He needs to do one for issue 3. I've enjoyed the experiment, and in all sincerity, his poem is actually annoyingly okay. So.
Right. But so do you see that when I said, like, I feel like this one's got like a bit stranger?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I guess it's just normal to us because we're just kind of embedded in it now. So it's just it's part of our process.
For me, reading the magazine through, I was really unsure, like, kind of, have they created like an actual, like, kind of chatbot thing fed on? Because you're totally transparent about it. Like, you say, like, these are the things that we fed it on, and like this said, but like it just sort of feels a bit like, no, come on, this is just like a creative writing thing. Like, but the fact that you like go to those extremes and actually make it happen, I think says a lot about what this magazine's all about.
Yeah, I think the diary piece at the front where we talk about our initial editorial planning meeting with Dr. Smile is straight down the line reportage.
Yeah.
It's exactly what we've done, and it's exactly what happened. And we went to Paris for a few days and interacted with him and tried to follow his experiments, and ultimately ended up rebelling against the schedule and the agenda that he'd set us because it became increasingly absurd. And we're not going to stage like impromptu literary readings in the middle of the restaurant, or go to the techno club and I can't even remember what they were, but have discussions and critiques which they didn't even really make sense, or kind of these sort of words that he just started to jumble together.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, it actually happened. I mean, I think something that what you were saying there is like, I was half expecting you to say, did you create this as a physical embodiment of Dr. Smile in an actual suitcase? And so yes, he is a chatbot that lives on software and in servers, but we did talk about creating him as a physical embodiment of that, and putting him into a suitcase. So we've done that as well.
Yeah, he
So
is
you can
available.
actually,
He is available to purchase if should
Yeah.
anyone want Dr. Smile for themselves.
so kind of would advise you not to, in all honesty, but like,
All right, so this like, I think then this is like an interesting development from, I was going to say issue 1, but even before issue 1, because one of the things that really interested me about Offal in the first place is your experimentation with AI. And I think, like, whereas like a lot of people's kind of like knee-jerk response is just like, oh no, I don't want that anywhere near like my creative projects, you're kind of going like, okay, well, how can we engage with it and make something from it? So I guess going back before Dr. Smile and even before issue 1, you were already experimenting with AI. So maybe tell us a bit about what that was, how that came about.
Yeah, I mean, I think our view basically is just that these are unavoidable tools. The genie won't go back in the bottle, and therefore, if you're going to do creative work, it is exactly that. Approach it in the spirit of experiment, and it's going to be about how you sort of formulate your engagement with those tools, rather than essentially if you kind of give it a dull prompt and ask it to produce to do your work for you, then it's not really going to produce anything of interest. Whereas if you engage with it in different ways, we're really interested in trying to get things to fall over and glitch, I suppose, and how far you can push things in different directions. I kind of recently presented on the Offal project to a panel who are kind of interested in. There's a group at part of the Turing Institute runs a kind of seminar group called the Arts and AI Commons, and I presented on Offal the audio for which we use text to voice synthesis to kind of procure performances of some material from the mag, but also more satirical stuff that we've kind of, I guess, created a kind of parallel universe in which this exists. So we can use voice clones or off-the-shelf voices to procure performances of the pieces, and presented this to the Turing Institute, and mentioned the fact that we're really interested in when the voices, sometimes I think people will be familiar with the idea that the text generators sometimes hallucinate and produce things that they haven't been asked to produce. And it's the same with the audio. We found that the voices will suddenly freestyle or glitch. And I sort of mentioned this in the presentation, followed up with a computer science professor at Portsmouth, who's very wary of calling those things hallucinations, because that sort of imparts, a human-like intelligence to it a priori. So, yeah, better to think of them as glitches. It's just a natural. I think there's an OpenAI paper published in the past month explaining why this happens, and that it's a sort of natural phenomenon to do with the ways that the aggregate is organized within the models.
Mm. Yeah, so I mean, like Mark's saying, I think this is like a few years ago that we started playing around with this sort of text to speech synthesis, AI voice, whatever you want to call it. As Mark say, they're not really good enough to replace the human voice, and I think that's what most people have. That's what they're kind of marketed as being able to do. So when you listen to a lot of sort of, social media and adverts and this AI voice stuff, it's hellish. It's grating, it's unengaging, and it's not good to listen to, and it's not good for, actors and voice actors and all sorts of things. But we were still interested in it as a medium, I guess. And we were like, there is something interesting about these AI voices, artistically and aesthetically, because they don't quite sound human, because they glitch or hallucinate, or whatever term we want to use, and they don't quite do what you want them to. So that's where our sort of early experiments with that began. And Gavin, our third kind of sort of member of the sort of writing and editorial team, started feeding bits from the magazine into his own homemade voice clones. It's very, very easy to do now, a little trickier at that time. And just producing performances and some of the sort of, basic off-the-shelf voices that were available. And we started to create this kind of radio universe where we could use these voices to perform what was on the pages of Offal and what we created for it. And it fitted well, because I think the slightly odd, satirical or dystopian or just unusual nature of the written material that we were creating, these voice actually fit this kind of style of performance very well. So we started to see it as another channel for how to realize what Offal was, and not just limit it to the printed page, but use these voices as a medium of performance when combined with music and radio stings and put into these little mini shows. And it was that artificiality and their slight sort of shitness that attracted us to it, because they create it's a good fit for our material, not because they're shit, but because it creates this slightly disembodied feeling. It can be a bit unsettling, a bit uncanny to listen to, and it's those kind of effects that we've found ourselves gravitating to, rather than in my experience, where you come across these voices, they've just been used as a cheap tool to replace human labor. And that's obviously not what we're interested in. But we're like, what can we do with this tool, which, as Mark has pointed out, is everywhere. They're unavoidable. And, can we push it? What can we do with the settings? What can we do in the back end and try and create something artistically worthwhile, or what we hope is worthwhile anyway?
So you started with taking stuff that has been created by people and then run that through this voice generator and kind of like, enjoying the sort of like artificiality that's created in there.
Yeah, it's all material that's written by us or contributors.
And so then with Dr. Smile, it feels like there's like a step on in terms of like, okay, we want to get some creative input from the AI and see what we do with this, but that's still very closely mediated by you and controlled. So is there then a step on, like it, or have you even done it already? Like, is there stuff in there that is created by AI?
No, with hard and fast rule, not
with
allowed,
the exception of Dr. Smile's poem, but which is kind of a sort of Easter egg and a little kind of joke that's been slipped in at the end. But no, there's no like I don't think there's anything interesting in handing over the controls to AI. I mean, we see the results of that every day, and it's
and we've
disappointing.
Kind of made that a sort of, as I say, sort of made that a rule that there's not like, that's why we were so explicit about what Dr. Smile was and how he was being used. And it's basically just a bit of mischief, right? I mean, it's a bit of a a sort of extended kind of literary art joke, using that stuff. And whereas the work with the text to voice synthesis platforms, it really is that there's something Rod, early on, you kind of said it's like, it's a bit like you abusing a 303, the way that acid house came from people, abusing a fairly basic bass synthesizer and twisting the knobs on it to make weird noises. That it's kind of that sort of approach.
Yeah, we're
And
very influenced. Obviously, we're influenced by books and publications and magazines, but Mark and I share a lot of common background and interest in rave and party culture and DJing and mixtapes and pirate radio, sampling, hip hop, and we kind of and as Mark's saying, the invention of acid house by kind of teenage or young producers taking a new musical tool, and which is boring if you use it for what it's designed for, and it's famously quite disappointing as a
although
a
it is
bass
used on,
accompaniment.
it is used on Orange Juice's "Rip It Up," I think.
Well,
So
there you go. Okay, there's always an exception, but it's more famous for being abused and twisted into things that its designers never imagined it would be used for, and unleashed an entire sort of global dance music subculture, which no one had ever considered. So, in the similar sort of spirit of play, I guess we like to think that these tools that are now available through our browser, essentially, we take a kind of punk and DIY spirit to them, and just what happens if we just start fucking around with them and doing like things they're not really designed to do, and what are the limits we can push them to, and what happens if we go beyond that. So yeah, spirit of play and adventure.
Yeah. What about the output from that? Because so you've got the little sort of audio, like sort of kind of 10-minute like episodes of Offal, and you've obviously got now 2 issues of the magazine. You've also got like a newsletter which is started, which is I think pointing people to like a paid version of the audio stuff. So like how do all of these different media kind of work together, and what do they basically give you? Like kind of what leads you to do something in one of these media?
What leads us to, or how do we kind of choose which? I think we're kind of collectively interested in Offal as a obviously the print element to it is a large part of it, but it is one part of it. And I think we see Offal as a concept and an idea, and the occasional print publication is a kind of sort of anchor that we kind of bring that out roughly once a year, but kind of as and when we can, and we're not sort of we're not nailed to a schedule. The audio allows us to be quicker and more responsive and more experimental in a different way. We can respond to topical occurrences, political or social occurrences quite quickly, whether that's through cloning a particular voice and using that, or just writing something which it's it's a quick turnaround. We put these 10-minute shows out somewhere between every few weeks to like every 6 weeks, depending. So it's a different cadence and it's a different experience. And I think we're also interested in what else can we do. We've talked a lot about taking that audio and putting it into an installation, using the audio set somewhere you can walk inside and inhabit and experience in a different way. And we have we have actually produced something for that. We did a show in Leeds with Art Angel, which Mark would be better placed to talk about in a minute. And we're also very interested in live performance, and we did something in Manchester in January about taking the music and the AI voices and live mixing that in front of a crowd with a live visual generation and having people do in-person readings. So I think we're interested in bringing that kind of theatrical, immersive and art installation kind of element to it as well, as much as we can, because I think it's interesting to explore, and the material support's being experienced in ways just beyond the printed page. What do you think, Mark?
Yeah, well, exactly that. I mean, I like that description of the book, the mag, as a kind of keystone. Really, that that's it. We kind of pull that together. That is a text based experiment, and so we are working throughout with text and thinking about what kinds of textual forms are gonna work best in that mix. And the audio has completely taken on a life of its own and sort of exists, while it borrows from the book, it it has repeat characters and things like that are distinct to the audio, and as Rod says, are kind of more, essentially the kind of weirdness of the text is given an entire universe in the audio and so forth. Yeah, and then we have used the sort of techniques that we use. The audio is also a collage. It should be pointed out. It uses collages music underneath the text generation and sound effects, and we've taken that approach to already producing one installation piece, but we have ideas for others. Yeah, I essentially they all kind of nourish each other. It's like it sort of bounces around. But as Rod says, yeah, the audio kind of keeps us disciplined. We're sort of we're regularly producing, and then in the background we're gathering material for the next print issue and thinking about how that will work. And then always too many ideas for art objects, for merchandise, for I mean, I don't, yeah.
Yeah, we do need to kind of edit and prioritize a bit because we're certainly not short of things to do or directions to go in. But I think the Art Angel exhibition was interesting because it was the first time we'd taken the audio expression of what Offal is and applied it to something else. And it was a commission for an art exhibition by this artist Gemma Anderson, whose work, drawings and paintings and sculptures and installations were all about the idea of the fourth dimension, the kind of mathematical and philosophical concept of the fourth dimension. And they asked us, Offal, to produce an audio piece for one room. And we used the same techniques that we used for the radio show and then applied them to kind of notes and diary extracts and academic papers all about the sort of discovery or conceptualization of the fourth dimension, and put it in a room where people could sit and experience that played on a loop. And I think we were all, and everyone seemed very pleased with how that turned out. So that's something we are quite keen to do and maybe apply more from within the Offal verse directly.
All right, so it sounds like work is underway on issue 3. Is that right?
Yeah.
We have some material that we've held back from issue 2 with a view to putting it in issue 3. So yeah, we're starting to compile, aren't we?
Yeah, and we've been sent some great stuff already by people who, we don't know who they are, but they've read Offal and they've sent us some stuff. And the things that we've read, there's been some really good stuff in it. Some of the pieces in Offal 2 actually were, just came directly to us, and there's more for Offal 3. So I think that's exciting. It's encouraging.
Totally.
And as Mark says, we've got there's a couple of heavy hitters, big names who have given us some interesting pieces for 3. So in terms of sort of conceptual direction, we haven't really talked much about it yet, but early days.
No Dr. Smile.
These things.
No, Dr. Smile.
Dr. Smile's going to be unplugged shortly after.
I mean, I'd love to know how much you're willing to sell him for. It sounds like, Mark, you'd get rid of him for a tenner. Right there. Just like, actually, come and pick it up and you can have it. That's fine.
Well, he's available in the shop for £10,000 at the moment, but that he has. At the moment, it's a theoretical. If someone were to buy it, we would create the AI in the suitcase.
It's an invitation to commission, essentially.
Fair enough. Got it. Well, look, as you know, I love what you're doing with Offal, and I'm looking forward to seeing you at the launch party on Thursday. What can I expect for the launch party?
Well, we've got some kind of DJs who have like far too swish and experienced tonight for Offal for what we're doing. It should be really nice venue in Peckham Social. DJs associated with the Numbers label out of Glasgow. I'm going to play a 7-inch set but Rod's like limited me to about half an hour before anyone arrives.
We think an hour is available. No, we want to get the readings off. I think doors open 6:30. We want to get the readings starting on stage at 7:30. And we've got Ned Bowman, we've got LaBeija from issue 2, we've got Alice, who was in issue 1, and Richard Millward, who was one of the highlights, I think, of issue 2 with his kind of manifesto written in Polari.
My favourite. That was my favourite piece.
Yeah, and from which the second headline, "Lubricate Reality with Dreams," this kind of sort of revolutionary manifesto line, we've taken from his piece and used as their sort of headline and our slogan really for this whole campaign's not the right word, but our whole this chapter around the second issue, because it kind of sums up something.
Well, I'm
lubricate reality with dreams.
Exactly. I want to be lubricated in reality on Thursday night. I'll see you there.
Okay.
Thanks
a lot. Thanks for having us.
Cheers.